I'm very bright. It's a bright light. Maybe we should turn that overhead light off. I know I have this light, but it's artificial. um, welcome to everyone. Yeah, we are, here we are a year later. A year later from when everything started getting strange. So it seems like this is a good time to stop and reflect on what happened in the last year. We each have our version of what happened. That light's doing something funny here, and maybe just turn it off. Yeah, thank you. Now it's black back there, but that's okay. We each have our own story about what happened last year and how our lives were impacted. But the point for tonight, I think, is to reflect and see if we can step back and step back and step back and look at what's happened to us, what's happened around us. Can we get some perspective on this experience that we've had over this time? Learn from the experience that we've had, but also shift some of the ways of thinking and seeing that we've been accustomed to.
Excuse me, Rudyji, it's Arabella. We're having a little, your volume suddenly dropped really seriously. So we need a little bit more volume.
Okay. We'll see if we can do something about that.
Okay, thank you.
Is that better? Does that sound better? No? Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Arabella, is that better?
We can hear you. It's not significantly better, but we can hear.
Okay.
Hey, Rudyji, it's Stephen. We heard a rustling right before the sound dropped. So did you move any papers or cover up your computer at all? You might have blocked your microphone.
Okay, no, I don't think so.
No.
Okay, well, let's keep going. If you can't hear, let me know. We'll try something else. Good. So the invitation is to step back and try to get perspective on our experience of the what's we now call COVID. Everybody knows what that means, and it has been a very drastic and sudden shift in the world around us, and of course in each of our own worlds, because we're adjusting and trying to deal with the situation in our own way and what works for us. But something is happening now, something is shifting now, and there's, at least where we are, and there's this sense that, that's good, there's this sense that, well, it's ending, or something's changing, or it's loosening up, or maybe this is about over. I don't know, maybe that's not true where you live, but I'm open to hearing people share what your personal experience is. And what can what can come out of this for us in terms of um, learning and rethinking how we go about our lives. What have we gleaned? What has been the benefit of this time of almost like a retreat, in a sense, of going inward and um, coming back and looking outward again. So anybody who would like to share what your experience has been or what your thoughts are, just unmute yourself and say your name and chime in.
I'm Randy, and I've found that I do not adapt well to change. I didn't do well changing from normal life to much more isolation. I had just finished chemo and had all these bucket list trips booked that I had to spend weeks canceling. And I was very disappointed and kind of angry or bitter early on in the isolation. Because of my health and the fact I'm caregiver for an elderly mother, I had to be very careful, or I felt I needed to. But now that I've had my second vaccination and am starting to eke out just a little bit, I find I'm very nervous getting out after months of isolation, where I had thought I would just be euphorious about going out again. I find a hesitation, a feeling in my mind, you shouldn't do that because I've been doing otherwise for so long.
Right.
It's just a major adjustment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Randy. And yeah, so this is we're just feeling our way through this experience, and like there's no roadmap, no clear instructions on what do you do now and how do you deal with this. So we adapt, we adjust to being isolated, and then like you say, we come back it's time perhaps to come back some, and then it feels like, well, that doesn't feel right either. So all of our regular reflexes are kind of off, and we can't just rely on doing what comes automatically. And that has been the story for the whole year. And the good news about that is that it breaks up habits that probably would never have yielded to any other kind of intervention. So that has its benefits as well, that what was automatic has now been disrupted, and now we're really in a position where we need to rethink. Okay, the old way isn't quite available, and I don't know what the new way is. So we have choices, like what would I like the new way to be? What would I like to, how would I like to do my life differently? It's as though all this stuff was written on the blackboard, and then someone came and erased it, and it's now, oh my God, well, what do I do now? Well, I guess I can write what I want to write on the blackboard. No one uses blackboards anymore, but but you know what I mean. So we have choice, and and this is thrust upon us, this choice, uh, and this in some ways is a great gift. So yeah, thank you. That's a important part of it. Like nothing feels quite right anymore. So wow, I have to start from scratch. Who else would like to share?
Hi, I'm Jerry.
Jerry.
How are you doing? Yeah, it's been basically lonely when you live alone and you don't have no one to talk to except through this and through Zoom. I'm zoomed out. Um,
Yeah.
that there's no, you know, I can see you, we can talk, but there's no really physical interaction of you being here or me being there, and
Mhm.
that something is missing. And
Right.
and with that, you know, I had signed up for several things that I just finally said I can't do it anymore. I mean, the Zoom thing isn't working for me uh, per se. And every once in a while, you know, I get on now, but yeah, it's luckily, you know, maybe it'll be another year, but slowly, you know, we'll be start doing things. Uh, and but luckily again summer, so we can be outside, and
Mhm.
that's the big key. You know, we've been cooped up in most of the time in our houses or going from house to house or to the store, but get outside and be outside, I think it will be a totally different aspect of the whole thing.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that's something that, depending on your climate where you are, we've been outside a lot doing planting and work in the outdoors, and that really helps. Um, so I recommend that if you can do it where you are, start right away. Get out the house. That's very helpful. Um, yes, thank you, Jerry. Um, what else comes up for people?
I would like to share. This is Sachin.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure if the perspective I'm going to present is, well, it's quite radical compared to most of the people that I'm close with. So I will just say that I started out not too challenged by the lockdown or the isolation because I'm used to being by myself and used to being fairly isolated. But as time went on, I started paying attention more to the greater picture and especially the political picture. And so the perspective that I took, which I still hold, and that I presented on Facebook, for which I was like roundly abused, was that the particular narrative that we're presented with by the government and by the media is, well, I consider it a false narrative. And so for me, and I guess I would phrase that in terms of that the narrative that we're presented with is a very narrow, mechanistic, allopathic medicine view, as opposed to holistic medicine view. So that was hard for me to express that to other people because it seemed like pretty much everyone I knew totally bought into this narrative that we are living under and with. And I was, because I didn't particularly want to follow the quote, the rules, I was categorized with Trump followers, and I was roundly abused by some people that I felt very close to. So, so that's what I have to say. That's the basic thing I have to say.
Thank you for that contribution. Yeah, I think it's a time, especially when we're alone and we spend a lot of time alone, then we begin to construct our own concept of what's going on, and that's perfectly legitimate. What really I think emerges when I listen to your sharing is that we seem to be in a place where you are referring to the allopathic and more holistic approaches to medicine, and the thing that is emerging, I think, is the whole question of fear. To what extent are we governed by fear, and where did that come from, and how is it woven into the way we think of everything, and how is it woven in to this particular COVID question? Kind of brings it out into the onto the table where we have to look at it. At least that's how I experience it. So what is the role of fear in your life? That's a question that might emerge from looking back over the last year. Well, we're terrified because the virus is said to be very ferocious. That be very dangerous, to be lethal and beyond anything that we've had before. And now, actually, after a year, we can see that that was not true, and that there were virtually no excess deaths. That's a term that's used in medicine for were there more people dying, or the same number of people dying, or less people dying. And actually, it was pretty much the same as usual. So that means that whatever was happening with the pandemic, it didn't result in more people, more fatalities, more deaths. And so that kind of takes some of the edge off as far as the fear goes, or it should. And so, this particular experience with COVID brings that up. But what I think is the rich part of this experience is that by bringing it up, the fear, it gives us a chance to look at how prevalent is fear in our lives, in my life, and for you and your life. How much of what I do and think is organized around fear. And my teacher, Swami Rama, used to say, live fearlessly. And he didn't say, except for COVID. He said, live fearlessly. And that's our it's an opportunity. Our lives can be delightful and full of joy, but not if we're living in fear. And so what is there to fear? Oh, well, I could die. yeah, well, okay, yeah, you could, and you probably will. Um, I mean, chances are very good that each of us will die. And when is the time that I will die? Well, then I could die now. Well, maybe this is the right time. I don't know. Um, we aren't so good at realizing when the right time is. There's a right time that comes, and that's our next step. That's the graduation. That's our big next exciting adventure is what happens after death. And there's no reason to be afraid of that. Unless, you could say, well, I have to go on this big trip. I'm going somewhere I've never been. I'm terrified. Well, that's too bad because you're not going to enjoy your journey so much if you're terrified. But what if it's like an adventure? I've never been there before. I'm going, and how exciting. Um, so really, there are no excepts when when the teachers say live fearlessly. It's live fearlessly all the time. Live fearlessly with whatever happens. Um, and so, you know, as we look more closely, I think in retrospect, we can see that the fear doesn't help. The fear was actually, to a great extent, not justified because there was not wholesale people dying. But I mean, even if there were, choosing fear is not gonna not gonna really help us. Um, but I think that what the lesson here is that um, we see fear where there there's no need for it. There we that it we see fear where fear doesn't even make sense. Even if you are, we fear the microbes, we fear the viruses, and there's a whole the great virus panic. Everybody's terrified of the virus. Well, viruses aren't anything to fear. They're not living beings. They're packets. They're little packets of genetic information, and they come into our bodies, and our cells are perfectly capable of chopping them up. They have enzymes that will disassemble the structure of the virus. Um, and some viruses are judged by the cellular mechanisms to be useful genetic information. In fact, um, half of your genes, half of your DNA, half of it was viruses that were incorporated into your DNA. So when the virus comes into the body, the cell looks at it. It has it's the most carefully controlled metabolic process in nature, is looking at these viruses and deciding, is this information, genetic information in this virus, something that would be useful to my body? And if there's like a series of different checks and balances that are done to see if this is useful, and if that genetic information is useful, then it is not only brought into the cell, but then it's replicated by the cell. That's not a hostile takeover. It's the body chooses to replicate it and send it out to other beings, other people and animals and plants, to like, hey, this is a great bit of information, and you might want to insert it into your software because it can help deal with the current situation. So we are in a very stressed situation on the planet right now. We can't think about COVID in the absence of the what's happening with the climate and what's happening with the toxicity in the environment. All these stresses are extremely hard on our physical being. And so we're designed by, the great designer. We're designed to have the capacity to shift and reprogram. And the way we do that is by inserting the information that comes from the viruses into our genome if it's useful. And if it's useful information to deal with this situation that others are dealing with, then we churn out those viruses and they go out into the atmosphere and everybody's breathing them and they're available. But they are they're available for use. No one has to use them. So this fear comes from our general positioning ourselves in a fearful way. We take a fearful stance in relationship to our lives and the world. And, so we're conquering nature because we're afraid of nature. And that's so ridiculous because we are part of nature. And the only way we can thrive is to be integrated into nature. And when we separate ourselves from nature, then we begin to get sick. And so, the fear is all our own conjuring up of these ideas, and the idea that the world is hostile. It's not a loving universe. The woods are dangerous. If you go out at night, something will get you. The microbes are coming after us and they're going to destroy us. I mean, this is actually what's called paranoid thinking, and it has so dominated. It's so woven through our culture. It's so woven through the stories we tell. It's so woven through the way we use our resources, that we have to have these huge military things because, they're trying to come kill us and we have to defend ourselves. And so this is prevalent. This is, I have to have money because something horrible is going to happen. And if I don't have any money, I'll just perish. We don't think in oh, well, someone can help me and I can help them. No, so fear is the very infrastructure of our world that we've created. It's the very operating system for our computer here. Fear. It's all based on fear. And you may think, well, I'm not really afraid, but then you think, well, everything has to be insured, and everything has to be, because who knows what might happen, So this subliminal fear that kind of pervades our way of thinking and how we operate in the world is, I think, being highlighted by COVID. It's like, okay, here, let's make it as vivid and blatant as it can possibly be, and then maybe we can see it, because we generally aren't seeing it. We're pretending it's not there, but it's there. So that's my little tirade. But because I think this is such an important thing, because fear is so destructive to our health, and it so undermines our spiritual process. Our whole development spiritually is greatly hampered by fear, almost shut down by fear. So the latent fear, the hidden fear, the underlying fear is what we have an opportunity to see now. I mean, we've seen it over the last year. We've seen it in the way that the information was conveyed. Like, well, cases are increasing. Everywhere is a hotspot. It's just well, but a case isn't. When I went to medical school, a case wasn't a positive test. A case was you were sick, you had symptoms, and maybe a test would help us figure out what it was, and then we could say, oh, it looks like it's this, and so it's a case of X. But a positive test when someone is in good health was not a case, but they started calling it a cases, and the cases are piling up. They're just everywhere. Well, that just means a lot of people were testing positive. And the test, we now know, we didn't at the beginning, is a very inappropriate test, because it's not, the test says it is not useful for diagnosing disease. It was a research tool. It's the, what do they call it? Anyway, it was a research tool, not a diagnostic tool, but they used that. And as a result, there were so many false positives because they were repeating the cycles of magnification, amplification, and then you get positive. So now they've backed off from that some. So there are less cases, less positive tests. So in retrospect, we can see a lot of the mistakes in thinking that we were prey to. And we can certainly see how the fear kind of took off like a wildfire. And yet the basis for the fear was hardly there at all. So I think that our task here is to look at the fear and go, all right, where is fear running my life? Where is fear creeping in that I haven't noticed? I just sort of rationalize it and say, well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to get sick. I got to be careful. Or
Rudyji, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
what do you think happened?
Battery 70%.
Can you hear this?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, I was just saying the fear. Can we see the fear that is latent and hidden that we generally don't see? Because the fear is really what we need to step out of. And then the whole quality of our lives and the whole possibility of spiritual growth and evolution is enhanced dramatically when we eliminate the fear. So looking back over the year, can you see where fear came up? Can you see what it did? Can you learn anything about fear in yourself or in your family or your friends? Or, can we reap the benefits of this experience? Can we reap the gathered data from this experiment of a pandemic of fear, and so that we don't need to do it again, and so that we can be more alert to when we're stepping into fear, when we're moving from fear rather than from love, joy, connection. So, it's ironic because we were separated, we were isolated, and it's like a forced retreat, spiritual retreat. And so we can feel the absence of connection and how detrimental that is. And so if we can step out of the fear, back into connection and back into joy, then it will all have been worthwhile. So I'm going to stop there and see what other questions or comments people might have, or sharing.
Hello?
Yes.
Thank you. I have, many things that I can share. So we're talking, I guess, about the pandemic. And
Well, I don't want to get into politics about this.
well, I think you started somewhat, so I think I can continue.
No, David, I don't want to do that.
Oh, what would you like?
Well, I can talk with you about that separately. Yes,
Oh,
yeah.
well, I have many other things that I can share about the whole COVID year. Would you like me to go into those?
Well, choose one. I mean, we don't want to go a long time with any one person, but choose one.
Oh, well, how about my alerting you and Garel about the Robert Kennedy Jr.'s Children's Health Defense. And of course, at one point, they sent out a link.
But I'm more interested in.
I can't hear you. Sorry.
Can you hear me? I'm more interested in
Yes.
your personal process and your personal experience rather than.
Well, this is. So yes, I certainly alerted you to the whole organization and to Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah,
And
I'm familiar with that.
yes, I know, because of me.
No, I think I knew about it before that. But anyway, do you have anything about your personal experience that you would like to share? I know these are things you read about and learned about, and that's great. But right now we're kind of trying to mine the wealth of personal experience that people here have had.
Well, yes. Okay. So personally, I sent out that link to you and to just about everyone that I thought would be appropriate. And of course, that would include people that I know from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. That would also include various people from an organization called the New School of the Body Electric, and various lawyers that I've worked with, and all sorts of people. And and of course, I put my contact information on the initial letter that email that I sent out. And I got all sorts of responses. Some, just wanted to make sure that it was me that sent it because they were a little afraid of.
Well, David, this is kind of going off on a tangent. So I'm going to have to ask you to wait, and later I can talk with you about that separately. So anybody else have something they would like to
share? Swami Ravi.
Yes.
It's Ruvain. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. And I look forward to meeting you down the road. I had a real treat last night meeting your lovely partner and a couple other people in the group, new faces, new friends. So that was terrific. You've given us a lot to think about tonight. And two things came up for me. The first surrounding the idea of choice isolation versus imposed isolation. I think pre-pandemic, there are times that all of us were able to make the choice when we want to be isolated and just be with ourselves, either, for those who live alone with their pets or just with themselves. And I know, speaking for myself, I love the time that I get to spend with my rescue dogs. I love my time online getting to play competitive Scrabble. But the thing that was interesting pre-pandemic versus pandemic was that I'm a very social creature as well. So when I elected to be out and about and mingling with people, it was an energy boost. It felt great making those connections. And suddenly that choice was taken away from me in large measure. So I had to transition or migrate to accepting that there was a certain imposed isolation that I wasn't comfortable with. And what's interesting to me, you talked about fear. Ontologically speaking, I've never been afraid of death, but there was a fear that arose in me during this imposed isolation, if you will, because I started to recognize, for whatever reason, I wasn't fully comfortable being alone when I was forced to be alone. I was stewing in my thoughts. Fear-based thoughts were coming up for me. I don't know if it was a matter of, is this going to be the new norm? And am I going to have to adapt to being a less social creature? But my fear had nothing to do in the context of death or demise. It more had to do with the context of, who am I in this new normal? Or is this the new normal? So it was really challenging, and it still is challenging, because I think that we are starting to migrate into a post-pandemic, if you will, reality. And I know for me, one thing that's been really special is, because I've been taken away from my typically social ability to connect with people, that now as I'm connecting with people as we migrate out of the pandemic, I'm really making a conscious choice to connect with people very intentionally, to really and say, hey, who are you? What are you? Like, I really want to know you, because I'm craving to get to know new people and know what they're about. So that's how it's impacted me. I don't know if that's helpful for the rest of the group, but I wanted to share.
Yeah. Thank you, because I think that illustrates beautifully that this experience had gifts, and now we come back with a whole different valuation of connection and social interactions, and what people have to offer, and a more really more discriminating use of our time and our connections. Like, I really want this to be something good, not just like ho hum. And so, sometimes we're dragged into these experiences by, um, the, the divine, and we resist, but it actually teaches us things we need to know and helps us approach life differently. It breaks the rhythm, or the ruts maybe that we get in. It has broken that for a lot of people, and it is annoying, and it feels like, well, I didn't ask for this, but maybe I'm getting what I need and not what I wanted. And so that's useful. Oh,
Robbie G,
thank you. Yeah.
it's Arabella. A couple of terms have come up that I think are useful for me. One is discrimination. We have all lived our lives with tapas, right? With containers, with restrictions, with agreements we make with ourselves. But this felt like an external tapas that was layered on top of our own lives. And I think that for me at least, I experienced that at some point as being out of control, which I see as my third chakra, my Manipura, out of control. But my Manipura is closely related to Muladhara, my root chakra, which is fear is its major issue. So I see that juxtaposition of fear and control kind of wrapping around a lot. And, I don't want to step back too far from the personal, because you asked about the personal, but there is something going on this dance between the masculine and feminine, which I'm finding delightful. It's, you know, you said earlier about being out in nature helps. Well, being out in nature helps because we are nature, and to try to set ourselves separate from it is problematic. So just one more thing, and then I'll yield. I woke up this morning with this profound realization that we as a country, most of our country, made a shift around time last night or early this morning. We decided that we would do something different around time. And we are being asked to decide to do something different around our connection with each other and around our interactions and around our relationship between the masculine and feminine. So that was kind of my aha this morning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Those are all great comments, and I want to particularly kind of highlight what you said about an imposed tapas, because that's what you were saying too, Audrey. And you know, so it's a tapas for humanity. You know, in that we're all humans and we're all doing certain things that are destroying us and destroying our environment and undermining our health. So it's like, this is not just for you, this is for the whole class. Everybody's going to go to your corner or go to your desk and be quiet or whatever. And so all of us got this tapas and this this containment and this separation and this inner directed attention. And because we are all involved in this, what's happening to our planet and to our environment and to our health, and we all needed to stop and, you know, stop and look. And so we stopped, and hopefully we're looking, and now we have the opportunity to start thinking about, well, where do we want to go from here? You know, we don't have to go back to the same old thing. In fact, in many cases, it feels like we can't go back to the same old thing for various reasons. So where do we want to go? What do we want to do? How do we want to restructure our lives so that we aren't living in fear so much, now that we've rooted out some of the fear and brought it to the surface and seen it in its florid form? Can we decide jointly and individually and collectively to step away from that fear and just keep vigilance on watching ourselves? When am I moving from fear, and how can I stop and say, wait a minute, can I do that a different way? Can I move in a different direction? Can I escape the habitual fear-based responses that I'm prone to? You know, this is the opportunity now, after a year later, that we've got all of it. We did this big experiment. We got all this data. Now, how do we want to use it? And I feel my contribution to this discussion is that I think the key is fear. And the keynote of this whole year-long experience was, look at the fear. Look at fear. Look how it can just, everybody can just get, you know, carried away with fear. And I mean, why? Because we're carrying it in ourselves all the time. And because all it needs is that permission, and you know, it just leaps into extremes. So yeah, I mean, this is just my formulation. I hope each of you will have your own formulation, but can we structure a life not built on fear? Can we do that? Can we each do that? Can I do that? Can I really get I mean, I've been thinking a lot about that. When are my responses or my movements and my decisions based on some undercurrent of fear that I'm used to explaining away in other manners, and can I find a different way? Because when I can move without fear, it's liberating, and this is our birthright, to be free, but we can't be free if we're operating from fear. They don't mix. We can't really be creative if we're operating from fear. There's not a lot we can do when we're operating from fear except suffer. And so, if we can see it, we can do something about it. And hopefully we're better able to see it now. And so I'm encouraging everyone to examine your life for the fear and see if you can operate around it and not from it. So I will invite you each to have your own project for implementing a new way of living now. Now, a year later. This is a year. A year is enough. I say a year is enough. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's do something different. And decide what you think is important. I mean, how much of it is about fear, or what it may be other things that you've discovered through your year of this process that will give you a different thing to undertake, a different transformation to launch, in your own life. But this is the time. I think we've done enough of that. Let's move on. That's my suggestion. Okay. Anybody? Who else wants? We have time for a couple. Oh, I see. Sorry, Jody had a question which she sent by chat. I'm going to read it. It seems that fear and spanda cannot live together. Yes, correct. Very good. However, the fear in this case seems to have served as a kind of tapas that may have allowed spanda to arise through different pathways. Can you say something about how the containment in this past year, can you say something about how the containment in this past year has, on the positive side of things, allowed spanda to flourish? Yeah, well, that's always the formulation in Tantra, is that when we contain, like through some practice or through something we decide not to do, that we have a habit, when we contain the habit rather than enacting the habit, that the energy that was connected to that habit and the actions that habit resulted in, that energy then comes up as spanda, as free energy, and is available for more creative actions and thoughts and so forth. And so that is the general principle, and it happens in our own personal practice. But here it was happening, as Jody is implying, it was happening on a huge scale, a planetary scale, practically. That the containment and the social distancing and the all those containments actually we should be able to predict that they will allow this new energy to surge forward. And so that's what I'm saying. Yep, this year, we've done that containment for a year. Now we should pay attention to allowing this creative energy and this inspiration to move up and reshape our lives individually and collectively. And now's the time. Why not now? When else if not now? So yeah, great. Thank you all for being here. and participating in this discussion. I think it's a really exciting time. And let's use what we've gleaned from this rather trying experience to shift things in ourselves, in our families, in our groups, in our country, on our planet, away from things that we know are crazy and self-defeating and destructive, and that we keep doing because, well, we can't do anything about that. Well, now we can do something about it. So, shall we say goodnight? Oh, yes. Let's connect in a week, right? We'll be doing a meditation next week, and we'll be doing a meditation on probably on this, creating a new life, creating a new world. The energy is coming up. I can see it everywhere. Things are changing. Let's ride the wave like the surfers do, waiting for the wave. Here's the wave. Take off. All right. You want to say anything? Just say good night. Oh yeah, you can unmute yourself and everybody say good night. And
thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.
Great discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.